Spotlight, lectures and performances on and around Albany State University.
Several interesting topics regarding China's gender issues. The faculty and students on this panel are those who went to China to do study abroad last summer. So they draw upon their personal experiences, and of course every individual has different perspectives. And some of them are talking about more serious issues, workplace, women in workplace, and some others are talking about more fun topics. But our first presenter is Dr. Judith Rosenbaum. She's going to talk about age and beauty.
I'm used to wandering, so this is going to be really awkward. I'm Judith Rosenbaum. I introduced myself this morning, but for those of you who weren't there, I'm a professor in the program Mass Communication, and my Chinese name was Bai Meigui, so just for those of you who are interested. Last summer, we had 3 faculty members and 10 students who went to China for a 4-week summer program. Most of our students were mass communications majors. And we spent about 4 weeks in Xiamen, which is a city on the southern part of the Chinese coast. It's right across the strait from Taiwan. The university was called Shada, and I think one of the words we all learned how to say was Shada Baichen, because it's what got us back home. If we got lost, we could just get in a cab and say that. There were a lot of things we noticed. I mean, we traveled from Atlanta to Xiamen. It took 3 days. I think we slept 5 hours. And there were some things we really noticed. Like the first thing I think the students can tell you they noticed was the shape of their dorm rooms, because some of them had beds made up of plyboards and a comforter, and that was it. They moved to another room, but still, there were the bathrooms, the squatting toilets, the enormous bugs that, tried to get into your room and your hair. There was the food, the language, the people, let's see how many Chinese people we can fit on one bus. I mean, there was a lot of stuff. There was one thing that really didn't strike me until I came home and I started to think about all the things that happened to me, and that was beauty ideals. And at first, when you're in China, everything looks so Western. I mean, unless you go to, the far back country, which we did too, where Chinese people look at you literally look at you like this with their head tilted. But when you're in Xiamen, like we were in Beijing, everything looks very Western, and you see ads and you assume, well, their beauty ideals are just like ours, women have got to look a certain way, they got to be skinny, they got to be pretty. But then several things just made me kind of sit up and take notice. One thing I noticed immediately was there was a lady who ran a store in the dorm where we lived, and everybody called her Ai, which I'm really mispronouncing, I believe. But it means auntie. And I called her Ai, and Dr. Joe said, really, you should call her Gigi? Jiji, which means older sister. Because, if you call her Ai, you're implying that she's a lot older than you, and she's not. And I went, okay. And I had one Chinese girl ask me, wow, you drink a lot of water. And I said, well, I get thirsty. And she said, well, that's probably why your skin looks so good. Okay. And then you walk down the street in China, and I don't know if y'all can see, but that's what most Chinese women look like. They wear they look adorable. There we were sweaty in t-shirts and shorts, and these girls were very, very girly. They would hold hands, they would have the pretty long hair, the umbrellas to keep the sun off, and just the skirts and the dresses and just, and our students noticed that too, because I actually pulled this picture from the Tumblr of 2 of our students who went with us. And then the final thing that really made me think is, and I wish we had this thing up in the middle. This is my swimming pool ID. And I don't know if you can see, and you probably can't, so if you want, I can show you afterwards. When I smile, and I'll smile for y'all's benefit, I have lots of wrinkles when I smile, like my eyes and my face. I mean, I'm gonna be a wrinkled old lady, right? Well, we had to get pictures taken for our student IDs, and this woman in the store, there was a line of probably 5 people, probably spent 5 minutes getting rid of these wrinkles of mine right here. So I don't know if you can see in this picture, but my eyes look, well, I look horrible because it's like 120 degrees outside and I hadn't slept for 3 days, but my wrinkles are gone. I have no wrinkles here. And I remember I said to Henry, I said, do they care so much about age? And he said, but they do in America too. And I said, yeah, but there's no CVS employee that's going to Photoshop your passport picture for you. You know, and so I came home and it all kind of came together and I was like, what are these Chinese beauty ideals? You know, are they so different from ours? I mean, I guess they must be. And so that's what I want to talk about today is, you know, what are Western beauty ideals? How do they compare to Chinese beauty ideals? Where do they come from? And most importantly, why were my wrinkles Photoshopped away? Because I love every single one of them. So I really wanted an answer to that. Western beauty ideals, I don't think I need to tell most, I think Dr. Joe is, I see like 3 men in here, but most of you ladies, we all know what the ideals are, right? You gotta be young, you gotta be skinny, unfortunately. And it didn't used to be that way. Naomi Wolf wrote a really interesting book where she noticed that up until about the 1950s, the perfect woman was the happy housewife. And then somewhere in the 60s, Twiggy was introduced. You know, we all know Twiggy. She's like the Kate Moss of the 60s, pencil thin. And it, you know, the ideal woman became the skinny, beautiful model, but someone who had no skills. You know, no apparent talents like could bake cookies or whatnot. And when you look at body esteem and body image, it's basically defined by your sexual attractiveness, weight concerns, and your physical condition. In other words, thin and young is better. If you're skinny and you're younger, that's great. Clear skin is awesome too. And in our society, we are dominated by the stereotype of the older, unattractive woman. You know, past a certain age, you're just not that interested. And in fact, when they interviewed magazine editors, they admitted to photoshopping older models to make them look younger. And I mean, and look at what all of us, you know, I'm sure we've all bought anti-wrinkle cream or lifting this or firming that, or, you know, I got to stay out of the sun because it gives me wrinkles. You know, it's kind of what we've embraced. And research has actually shown that middle-aged women tend to rate themselves as less pretty than they did 10 years prior. So as women get older, they rate themselves as just less in line with these standards. Now, when it comes to Western beauty ideals, there are some contradictions. Not so much a contradiction, but Western beauty ideals, the male gaze tends to focus on our body. A research study conducted about 6 years ago analyzed a whole bunch of advertisements, and they found that in Western ads in the United States and Canada, most of the time the pictures were of the women's bodies. So the way I'm standing right now would be wrong. You know, I'd have to be out here. It's about the male gaze in the West is on, you know, your boobs, your butt, your hips, you know, the works. And also what I thought was really interesting is that even though older women in the West realize, yeah, I might not be as pretty as I used to be, but I'm okay with that. You know, and they've developed these like secondary cognitive strategies to say, well, I might not be as tight or as skinny, but you know what, that's really not that important. So these Western women have kind of like learned to reduce the importance of these ideals. And also what's really interesting is, I don't know if anybody here has read 17 lately, but if you see the models in there, they all are very serious and they're very defiant. You know, they're independent and serious women. So they're not very girly in magazines like 17. Now, when I went to China, somehow I expected it to be completely different. I don't know why, because we all, you know, China's very westernized. I expected it to be just less focused on all that stuff. You know, I thought only us in the West were this crazy, but apparently not. I mean, let's talk about that Asian/Chinese, and I say slash, I know that's like, I'm really offending every Asian person in the world right now, but there's been very little research on China specifically, so we're just gonna look at Asia and then kind of narrow it down. And what I want to do is I want to talk about body image, facial features, and youth. And then we'll talk about how that developed out in Asia, and we'll finally be able to explain why my wrinkles got photoshopped away. We look at body image. I'm sure you all know, even out in the West, it used to be that the bigger, the better. You know, because the ability to eat a lot of food was a sign of affluence. It used to be like that in China as well. And even older generations in China still believe that plumpness is a sign of affluence and wealth. And historically, they believe that in China that women should eat less than men. I'm not sure why that is. I couldn't find anything on that. But it appears that that belief has really won out in China. That nowadays, women have, even Chinese and Asian women in general, have this drive for thinness. So even while obesity in Asia is nothing compared to the obesity we have here in the US, most Chinese women will tell you, I want to be skinnier. And their standards, their ideals for how skinny they want to be is way more than how skinny we as Western women want to be. So they embraced this idea of thinness and ran with it, and they're running much faster than we are. In 2012, they did a study among Chinese college students who said that the ideal body was tall and thin, which is basically a Western woman. You know, Chinese women tend to be shorter than we are. Their bodies tend to be built on more straight lines, and they want it to be almost shaped like a Barbie doll. So they want it to be skinny, but they want it to have really big boobs. Sorry to get so, physical, but there you have it. It's this Barbie doll effect that they have. Another thing that's really important in Asia is facial features. Chinese and Asian beauty ideals in general are really focused on the face. A lot more than beauty ideals. And they did a research study among Chinese Canadians, and it included a whole bunch of ethnic groups, and it included Chinese Canadians. And of all the ethnic groups, these Chinese Canadians were least likely to be content with their face, with their own facial features, which would imply that to them, their standards for what their face should look like is a lot higher than the other ethnic groups. And when you think about it, it's kind of in line with historical developments. If you've ever been to a Chinese restaurant, the types of pictures you usually see is something like that. I don't know if y'all can see it. It's panoramic, it's nature, there's usually not people. When you think about Western art from the Middle Ages, it features people, right? I mean, think of like Van Gogh, think of Vermeer. I'm originally Dutch, so you're getting all these Dutch artists right now. They feature people eating, dancing, celebrating, pouring milk, wearing an earring. Chinese art features nature. People aren't featured. When women are featured, it looks like this. And again, I don't know if you can see it. If you can't picture Mulan, okay, Mulan is usually dressed in wide garments, right? And all you see, just like you see in this picture, is you see someone's face and you see their hair, because they don't wear tight-fitting clothing. It's not like those medieval paintings in the West where the women have their business hanging out for everybody to see, And so historically, the male gaze in China is focused on the face and not on the body. Well, if you go to any Western museum, you'll see the women with the boobs, and they'll have the corset, so the male gaze has been trained to look at the body as opposed to the face. And that kind of explains why in China they're so focused on facial features, because it's a historical trend. It's something they've been doing for centuries and centuries. Another thing that Chinese beauty ideals look at is they love a light skin. Porcelain, light, smooth, silky, no hair. The light thing is something you also see in the West. Both among African American and white women, because working out in the fields among white women meant you got darker, and that showed you were a manual laborer. And I don't think we need to go into the brown bag, dark skin versus light skin discussion, because, I think we're familiar with that. But out in China, it's a big deal even today. Women, you saw that picture, women will walk around with umbrellas to just, God forbid I get a tan, And we used to have like, why are they wearing these and why are they carrying umbrellas? Well, it's also for the cicadas urinating on you, but it's also for the sun. Yeah, you're laughing, but you know what I'm talking about. They also liked to have a long face, Chinese beauty ideals, big eyes, long face, oval, delicate features. So they really like this Western ideal. Women with the huge eyes, like you might see in anime. The big eyes, the long nose, oval face. So they want to look more Caucasian. At the same time, though, this desire to have a very smooth, hairless face is also a sign of youth. The baby, so, we see it in our commercials too, have a skin like a baby. So just like in the West, in Asia and China, youthfulness is very important, but in Asia, it's probably more of an important factor because they focus so much on the face. And that face is really where you can see how old someone is. So let's talk about youth just a little bit. There's been one lone research study on this, so I'm kind of going into the field of speculation here. Youthfulness has become kind of the pinnacle of beauty, and it's kind of bled over into other aspects. There have been some recent signs that even like the Chinese political party is starting to favor younger people over older people. They've recently lowered the age at which people can, be influential in influential positions in the government. they've done investigations of Chinese beauty ads, and they found that, remember I talked to you guys about 17 just now and how the American ads, you know, the women look defiant and angry and independent. Well, in the Asian counterparts, these women would look girly and cute and young and adorable. So you see that while teenagers in America are portrayed as, you know, the, not the girl next door, but the kind of the tough chick, in Asia they're still much more portrayed as cute and young and adorable. And again, that focus on that hairless skin, that baby smooth skin, points to that idea of youth. So for me, that really surprised me, you know, and I really wondered why that is, because when you look at it, China, everybody I'm sure is familiar with Confucius and his beliefs about elder respect. I mean, Confucius was a major philosopher from China who really, you know, believed in the importance of what he called filial piety, meaning that you respected your elders. You took care of your elders. When you got up, the first thing you did is you went into your parents' room to see if they were okay. You gave them the best seat at the birthday party, things like that. And so you would expect a country like China to revere wrinkles. And, you know, you would expect them to not want to Photoshop that away. So what happened? Well, it's easy to say that it's Western influences. But China hasn't been open to the West for all that long. So I figured that can't be it. So I looked into that, and there's several reasons why China has kind of gotten rid of this elder respect and this belief that, you know, age is good. The first thing is the People's Republic of China. Mao basically came to power in 1949, and he completely got rid of this idea that you need to be loyal to your elders, right? He believed your loyalty was to the nation, it was to the party, it was to, you know, himself. It was not to your parents. And in fact, what he did with all his economic changes is he took land, business, property away from families. So people no longer relied on their parents for income, for food, they relied on the state. And so that kind of broke down that Confucian, you know, belief in respect your elders and care for them. And then of course there were various cultural changes. Think about the Cultural Revolution that started in 1966, where Mao actively encouraged young people to, as he called it, oust the bourgeoisie. But it was basically, I need you guys to take charge and, you know, get rid of any elders whom you don't trust. So teachers, parents, leaders, they were tarred, they were feathered, they were beaten, they were killed. You know, there was this belief that the youth knows it all. Mao told the youth, you are the true communists, your elders are not. So there's a whole generation of Chinese people who were raised during the Cultural Revolution who believe that you can't trust your elders. In addition, it's also true that China has moved from an agrarian to an industrial society. And in an industrial society, sociologists have found that the relationships are less focused on your extended family and more focused on your spouse. It's more about conjugal relationships. So it's less about my parents and more about my kids and my significant other. And then, of course, there is that focus on the West. And what that means is that because the West has a more consumer-oriented culture, business has become more focused on young people because young people have more buying power. So these young people have become a lot more important. Also, China has changed a lot since 1980, and vast changes. So the young people of today can't relate to their parents who might have been born in 1960 or 1970. Or 1950, God forbid. And so they just don't respect them because you have no idea what I'm going through. So in conclusion, Western and Asian beauty ideals, they're definitely similar. You know, they both portray women as submissive, caring, nurturing, loving, pretty. But for the West, we are more sexualized when it comes to our bodies. We better have the boobs and the behind. While on the other hand, Asian models need to be cute, they need to be young. They need to be very young looking. And that is why the lady in the Photoshop at Shaman University decided to Photoshop out my wrinkles. Thank you.
Even I, as a Chinese, learned a great deal from Dr. Rosenbaum's presentation. My 2 cents on the long tradition of filial piety. That tradition, in my view, unfortunately applied to men for the most part, and much less applied to women. It is maybe it's telling that I was there, witnessed it when Dr. Rosenbaum's pictures get photoshopped. I saw that, And I was there, I took my picture too. But the lovely lady in the store didn't bother to Photoshop my wrinkles.
I remember that. That made me so mad.
Yeah. So isn't that very interesting? Next, we have 3 student presenters, one after another. And they're going to talk about topics of their specialty. And I probably don't have much to say, areas that I'm not particularly familiar with. Danielle Wilcoxson.
Hello, everyone. Just to piggyback off of everyone, what they said, I was one of the ones that had a chance to go to China last summer. Since we got on the plane and stepped foot in China, we always saw something different. Well, we all saw different things. But what I'm focusing on today is dating. Now, what I've noticed from being in China is that people in China love public display of affection. They love that close connection with one another. You will see friends holding arm in arm, hand in hand. You'll see couples, hand in hand, just real affectionate. I don't know if Robin will remember this, but we were on a bus and, it was so close fit, nowhere to sit down. And this boy, he was holding his girlfriend so tight so she, would be safe or whatever from falling. It was a little bump that came in the bus went on a bump and the girl almost fell. But without hesitation, he kind of grabbed her to keep her from falling. And it's so different from how people are on Albany State campus, because they probably would have picked up a phone, the girl would have fell, put her on Instagram, probably would have put some words under it, see how many likes they get, and it's just ridiculous. So, another picture that I took, we were coming back from the main road where, McDonald's, KFC, Pizza Hut, all the westernized food places were. We were walking back to our dorm, and we saw a young couple sitting by the steps. And I thought it was so cute. The girl was sitting on his lap, and they just seemed so open and honest about their relationship. So I decided to take a picture of it. They didn't shy away from the camera. They, all they did was laugh, put their head down, and I just thought that was so cute. You would never see that on this campus. Well, I don't know. I haven't ever seen anything. I don't know. Have y'all ever seen any public display of affection on campus? No? Exactly. What I think it comes from, people like to be sneaky. They don't want everyone in their business. They don't want people to know who they're talking to. So therefore, you won't ever see someone, holding hands, arm in arm, sitting in someone's lap, kissing someone, holding someone close. And, people in the U.S. just don't get in my business. You don't need to know who I'm talking to. So, next I want to talk about is dating in China. Now, just to piggyback off of what Dr. Rosenbaum said, it was a lot of cultural changes in 1949, and that goes along with arranged marriages. Arranged marriages was banned around that time, so people had more freedom to do other things. And I came across an article by Evan Osnes. It's called Letter from China. And it was pretty much based on this co-founder of a dating service. Her name was Gong Haiyang, and it's called the Serious Dating Website. Now this website is so serious, they not playing any games when it comes to this website. And it's a direct quote from the article that I'm about to share with you. It says, "We're not like you foreigners who make friends easily in a bar or go traveling and chat up a stranger. This is not about messing around for fun. Our membership has a very clear goal: to get married. That lets me know that people in China pretty much take marriage and dating as serious. They look for, they use dating as their way of finding their significant other, the person they're going to spend the rest of their life with, and that's just so much different than how we are in the U.S. Along with this website, it's very meticulous. You can filter by blood types, height, zodiac signs, income, and you can also filter to see if the person is suspicious or not. But they said the more valid documents that you send in, like a government ID, divorce filings, housing certificates, pay stubs, the more credible you become, or the more you look like you're for real and not about games. So to sum it all up, I think I also have some statistics. Just to share some similarities and some differences. The similarities between China and the U.S., we have dating sites, since I only talked about dating. And their marriage is more serious in China. They're more public about their significant other. And in China, women cannot marry if they are younger than 20. And men cannot marry if they are younger than 22. In the U.S., a woman or a man can get married if they're 16 or 17, if they have parental consent. To legally marry, you can marry at 18. So, just to sum it up, I just say that China is more important. They treat dating as more important, and the U.S. does not. And thank you for my presentation.
Oh, very interesting topic on dating. Well, our next topic, I believe it's very similar, but it's more kind of social, making friends, how the Chinese youth does that. Let's welcome Robin Okwuosa.
You press this button. Okay, great. Greetings, I am Robin Okwuosa, and I want you to know how important it is to study abroad, because your exposure will expand your expectations. I will start by sharing my recent experience about my trip to China this past summer. It was such an experience, and of course, a culture shock. I have traveled in the past, but nothing as different as China. Before leaving, I had no idea what to really expect. Looking at different movies and listening to stories made me assume what to expect. Expectation management was a term that we should all have known before leaving for China. While packing, my mom mentioned, do not pack any shorts that are too short. That would be disrespectful to their culture. That gave me the idea that the Chinese are very conservative people that don't show much skin. My mom also mentioned, be on your best behavior, just focus on work, no partying. So I took that as the Chinese don't have fun. All of my assumptions were wrong. As we arrived on the campus of Xiamen University, two young ladies were outside of the residence hall drinking beer in short shorts. I was shocked and appalled. My assumptions were all wrong. As the days went on, we enjoyed Chinese language class, Chinese history class, calligraphy, and paper cutting classes. We went on many excursions and were able to explore Xiamen and other nearby cities. Because of this trip, I am now a global ambassador for my university. Take advantage of these opportunities. Just as all of my assumptions were wrong, yours may be too. I had no idea what to expect when it came to social outings in China. One night, we decided to take a chance and go to a nightclub. It was easy to take a taxi. We went to the club where we were told about by students we met earlier on campus. If you see behind me is a picture of the club that we went to. It was called Club Louis I. It was very, very big. This is a picture of us outside of the club. One of the pictures, if you can see, I'm pretty sure you all can't see over there, but a Chinese guy actually jumped in the picture with us. They were really friendly over there or whatever. As we arrived to the club, it was 2 separate lines, just as there are in America. But one line was for males and one line was for females. We were checked by security and allowed access into the club. I saw that the women were really dressed up. A lot of them wore dresses and heels, while we were a bit more laid back. There was a woman at the door with a headset who seems to be running things. She directed us to the dance floor where the partygoers were, and we decided to just observe how the people were. Men and women dressed in the latest fashions, swinging their hips and pumping their arms, shuffling their feet and trying to oppress one another. Usually this image is accompanied by the Billboard Top 40 or at least the latest techno thumping from the speakers. But I was curious, was this merely a Western picture of clubbing? Meaning, are they imitating how they think Americans party? I entered the club where we were greeted with the techno blaring from the speakers, so loud we had to yell in each other's ears to communicate, just like we had to at American clubs. After that, it was time to hit the dance floor. The second we got in there, though, you could feel the attention centered on the tall black guy and the 4 black girls, or as they would call us, the foreigners. We didn't let that stop our fun, and the partygoers noticed it. The women began to dance around us and to have a good time. This is another picture outside of the club with me and the 2 Chinese partygoers. And this is inside the club. It was actually a woman performer. As I mentioned before, the women began to dance around us and have a good time. While we were dancing on the stage began to move, and the security was telling us to get off the stage because someone was about to perform. It was a woman performer, dressed just like a performer would in America. Once again, I was shocked and just felt like I've been living under a rock the whole time about what I thought China really was. She rocked the house and even had backup dancers. The women were really touchy-feely, and I began to think they were just excited to see foreigners. The Chinese seemed really friendly. This is another girl that went on the trip with us. The Chinese girl behind her was like really excited to, take a picture and stuff like that. They were really having fun. This is another picture of us in the club with the Chinese people. At an event on campus with the Turkish students, the host was a young Chinese girl and a Turkish boy. I noticed that the girls are a lot more outspoken than I thought they would be. The top picture is the 2 hosts of the talent show, and the girl in the white and black is the Chinese girl. And you all know to be a host, you have to have a personality and stand out and be able to captivate your audience and things like that. And basically, I was saying that before I got to China, I really had no idea what to expect. I really thought that the girls would be like more in their shell instead of standing out and being in front of a crowd and directing things. So in conclusion, I would like to say that what we see in different forms of media may not be what's real. It's hyper real, meaning media shapes what reality should be. Chinese women in the social aspect are extremely friendly and outgoing. That's from firsthand experience. No research needed. Thank you.
We learned about a lot of fun things from these students. We have another student presenter had this wonderful opportunity of doing internship with a Chinese newspaper. So she's going to share with us her experience, and she's going to talk about from her observation, women's role, gender role in China's workplace. Zaykeria.
Hello, everyone. Like they said, I had an internship while in China. Had to get the clicker right. Setting the foundation. Summer 2012, I was able to intern and study abroad in China, Xiamen, China. And I interned at the Common Talk Weekly, and that's a bilingual newspaper that is sent out weekly. In my duties and accomplishments while I was there, I got to edit newspaper articles. I interviewed persons for feature stories, and I also wrote 2 feature articles that were published in the Common Talk Weekly. I also, while I was there, I observed many people and what they did. The things that I observed was that the female to male ratio was pretty steady. It wasn't more men or more women. Most men worked as writers, photographers, and held senior level positions, and that's something I really want to focus on. Most women held visible leadership roles, which are editors, reporters, layout designers. It's the roles that you've seen people do. Most men wore t-shirts and shorts to work. They didn't wear like suits and ties or button-ups. And most women, like Dr. Rosenbaum said, they were very girly. They wore dresses and skirts. They rarely wore pants. Also, this reflects the cultural norm for men and women. And the working environment was very slow and quiet. To me, it was boring, but it was slow and quiet. And most of the men, while they were working, they would be asleep while the women were like kind of busy trying to make sure things were edited and all that good stuff. And it's very common. You know how like if we're in a meeting, you won't answer your phone or in mid-conversation pick up your phone, but they would pick up their phones in meetings while they're talking to you, and it's not considered rude. And you mostly seen men do this. Just to define media leadership, when I say media leadership or senior level positions, I mean the person that owns the company or who has the presidential role or the vice president role. And the person with the editorial role is just the person that may be within the newsroom who doesn't necessarily run things. And there's 2 parts of leadership. The first tier is that the senior level positions are owned by the government, and that's mainly male dominated, and that's why females, I feel, aren't in those top positions. And in the second tier of leadership, you have where the media organization goes to hire people. And they may hire women to be editors, but they won't hire them to be the managers or the president. And the theories that I'll use to support my observations are the glass ceiling theory and the feminist standpoint theory. Here's a definition of the glass ceiling theory, and I'll let you read that as I'm talking. But the glass ceiling theory is basically something that you really can't see, but is there, and it keeps women in particular for this presentation from climbing the ladder of promotions and positions. The problem of gender-based inequality is global, so it's not just in China, it's also in the United States and other parts of the country. And what I mean by that, who holds the highest positions, consider observations of the women who had the visible leadership roles, but then the men who had the presidential roles or owning the companies. This is like I said, this is a problem that's worldwide, and women, they don't really get the top positions because they're kept on the lower levels. They're not able to have experience to be able to move to the top level. So it's just a glass ceiling. It just keeps them in the same place. And the feminist standpoint theory is basically, it's from a woman's perspective, and it isn't just some off-the-wall claim, but it comes from observing and making valid points and insights. So basically basing their opinions and stuff off of research. And these are just some data. The workforce in China is made up of 33% of women, but only 8.5% holds the positions that are able to make decisions. So you can see the big difference between the amount of women who work there and then the amount of women who have the money-making or the decision-making positions. Many women journalists also, they frequently receive soft topics, or they receive the not big jobs or writing assignments because they're women and they're in the lower positions. And some of the limitations that you find from the feminist standpoint theory is that women, they don't get the positions because they have family responsibilities, or saying that they get pregnant and they have maternity leave, or they always have to go out and talk to their kids at the schools, or, you know, so that's why they're limited. That's the reasons that they give. That they have the modest woman attitude that's kind of submissive to men, that says, well, a man should do the job because I'm just a woman. Government control, like I said, those that are in that first tier of leadership are controlled by the government, and those that are in the government are males, so quite naturally, they'll hire more males. And even though these are limitations, a large number of women that are journalists are comfortable with just being a good journalist. They don't want to have power, or they don't want to be in the top positions. But in conclusion, although Chinese women face many gender inequalities in the workplace, women activists, groups, and Chinese legislators have made many contributions to workplace equalities. And these are some of the contributions they've made. They've participated in international forums. They passed enforceable legislation that protects women's interests. And they also publicly proclaimed its values and goals. So basically, they raise awareness about inequality, gender inequality. Are there any questions about this presentation? Okay.
Well, that certainly is a very important topic, isn't it? Well, my fellow panelists have talked about most of the interesting and important stuff, leaving me a difficult spot. So if you bear with me for a few more minutes, I'm just going to make my attempts to sum up the progress China has made in improving women's well-being and the problems that the country still has. Let me bring up my PowerPoint. Well, let's see. Is that how it works? All right. Well, this is not China, but this is in the news nowadays, these days. So in a way, the Chinese gender issues and gender issues in this country are kind of parallel. And we are both making great progress. We still face a lot of problems and limitations. It's the newest debate. Of course, her book, Sheryl Sandberg, the chief operating officer of Facebook, a woman in a very high position, a top position. Her analysis, of course, a lot of the women's issue today, women problems today, women have themselves to blame. They are not assertive enough. But of course, there are much more complex social background there. To talk about China's women problems, women issues, we have to know a little bit about its history, its long history, and for women, it's a tragic history. For thousands of years, Chinese women were perceived as properties of men, of their husbands. And they have no rights to their husband. They are property, just like something close to a slave. Their women's primary value is being a mother, giving birth to offspring, to children, and being beautiful objects, sexual objects of their men, for their men's joy. One extreme example is tradition of the ancient Chinese women's feet. This is a distorted notion of beauty, what makes a Chinese woman beautiful. if you have never heard about this, this picture, if you can see this picture, pay attention to her feet. They are tiny, but they are not natural. Women are not born that way. A closer look. So how did that happen? Men wanted to happen. Isn't it tragic? So in ancient times, Chinese girls, from they were small girls, they were forced to have their feet bound very tightly. You see their, how should I say, their toes were bended underneath their feet. That's how it is done. That's how it was done. Well, modern time, we still have our notion of what is beauty. Okay, now we know we have made a lot of progress, of course. And in China, women's liberation movement started from since the fall of China's last dynasty, Qing dynasty. And at the same time, we know that in the West, there was women's suffrage movement, right? So that influence, that Western influence, travels to China as well. Another era of tragic is rape of Nanking, also known as the Nanking massacre, where the Chinese men were massacred by the Japanese soldiers. Women, it's worse, they were raped and massacred and killed. Following the World War II, in China they called it anti-Japanese war, but it's part of World War II. Following World War II, it was China's civil war between the Nationalist Party, the KMT Party, and the Communist Party. We all know the Communist Party won and founded the People's Republic of China. But during the Civil War, just very similar to women, to the fact that women found their important role during America's Civil War and World War II. The Chinese women found their important role in the Chinese Civil War as well. And the Chinese leader, communist leader Mao Zedong, recognized that, acknowledged that. So he pushed for women's liberation. He recognized the importance of women in the workforce. Women is half the sky. Mao is a political leader. He was also a poet. He once wrote this line, 中华儿女多奇志，不爱红装，爱武装. What does that mean? Well, the first sentence means the sons and daughters of China do not lack in unusual ambitions. What kind of ambitions? Give us some examples. Of course, the emphasis is on daughters, not on sons. The women would prefer military uniforms to feminine attires, like this. Though even today in America, we're still talking about women's place in the military, right? It's still not quite equal. Over time, so under this new socialism, promotion of women's equal place, driven by the state, the country has more and more women in leadership, but still there are still a lot of obstacles. Women's place in the women's role in the leaderships are oftentimes guaranteed by a certain quota, but that's pretty much about it. Not much more than that. These two pictures shows the fourth Women's Conference in Beijing in 1995. Do you recognize what this is? This is China's first female astronauts. So women indeed have made a lot of progress in China's all careers. But you probably know that China's astronauts were all selected from the Air Force, so still in the military. Some of the persisting problems, glass ceiling theory, Zaykeria mentioned that, still perceived somewhat normal. Part of it, women still have themselves to blame. They see it as normal. They somewhat accepted that fact. And as a byproduct of China's open reform policies, we are seeing some of the bad stuff coming back. Prostitutes, mistresses, of course, related to China's government corruption, business corruption, and sex bribery is perceived rampant these days. And we're also seeing increased wealth gap. We see wealth gap in general, but we also see wealth gap increase between the two genders. This has led to this phenomenon, people's ideal spouse. When a woman is looking for a man to marry, he's looking for money. She's looking for money. When a man is looking for a woman, beauty is the most important thing. This picture shows a popular matchmaking show in China. All these women on stage, 24 of them, they are trying their best to show their beauty. Another problem, big problem, as a result of China's one-child policy, and since the 1980s, when ultrasound techniques has become more and more common. And also because the long tradition of discrimination against baby girls, and particularly in rural China, people still favor baby boys, not girls. So the ultrasound technology allows rural parents to use illegal selective, where they found out that the fetal is male, and they use illegal selective abortion, which led to more baby boys than girls. This is the ratio in 1912, just last year. 117 boys for every 100 girls. The record high happened in 2008, 120 boys per 100 girls. This is a common scene in rural China, a government propaganda slogan calls against discrimination against baby girls. It says discrimination against baby girls, abusing baby girls, or abandoning baby girls are illegal. In conclusion, well, in the past century, China indeed made a lot of progress. I would argue that probably no other country has made such drastic improvement in women's well-being. In the West, I may be wrong, but think that women's well-being a century ago in this country or in Europe was probably slightly better than Chinese women. And China still faces a lot of vexing gender problems, which I just explained. Thank you so much.